Titanic cuts through the waves like it was butter. She wasn't as fast as the Lusitania and the Mauretania, but she still managed to steam through the Atlantic at 23 knots. She had one of the most luxurious accommodations at the time. Days into the voyage, the Titanic was given several iceberg warnings. Warnings about the ice field that lays ahead of the great and mighty ocean liner that is Titanic. Most of these warnings never reached the bridge. And one of the last iceberg warnings that Titanic had was from the Californian, which then Titanic briefly said or told them to
keep out. Shut up. I'm working. Take race.
They were trying to rally a lot of passenger messages to their loved ones at the USA or Britain. Now, before you criticize every single action of the crew, which is understandable, having the message not delivered to the bridge doesn't mean Captain Edward J. Smith didn't heed the warnings of the other ship. Titanic's captain was not brain dead, unlike a certain Italian captain that capsized the ship and crashed into another port. Captain Smith had Titanic's speed reduced to around 20.5 knots or 21 knots, and had Titanic's route rerouted to further south before attending the dinner service in the first class dining room. Captain Smith hoped that if he diverted Titanic at a more southerly course, Titanic could avoid the ice field altogether. After Captain Smith left the bridge, Second Officer Charles Lightoller called the crow's nest and told him to keep a sharp eye out for icebergs, as the waters were unusually calm, making it difficult to spot icebergs, as waves were not hitting the base of the icebergs, creating a foam around it, making it easy to spot. But in calm water, this was simply impossible. And it's not like they could use the moon, as it was a moonless night. To add insult to injury, the binoculars were also locked away since a certain idiot named David Blair forgot to grab the key to the binoculars when Titanic first departed Southampton. Anyways, enough with my ramblings. As the clock hits 11:39, April 14th, 1912, Titanic creeps ever closer to the iceberg in front of it. Then a loud ring from the crow's nest could be heard. The phone of Titanic's bridge rings, and one of the officers quickly picks it up and heard from the crow's nest, "Iceberg right ahead." The officers on the bridge acted quickly, telling the helmsman Robert Hitchens to turn left or hard to starboard, and sent a message to the engine rooms to immediately reverse the engines. But sadly, this wasn't enough. As the clock strikes 11:40, a loud scraping noise could be heard below the waterline or hull of the ship. The iceberg effectively damaged 5 of Titanic's watertight compartments, and she started to rapidly fill up with water. Murdoch had all watertight doors closed, but it was futile, as the death of Titanic has begun. As the iceberg passed Titanic, the rumbling and scraping of the iceberg had Captain Smith's, J. Bruce Ismay, and Thomas Andrews' attention. Captain Smith rushed up onto the bridge of Titanic. Captain Smith had no idea what just occurred. Murdoch proceeded to tell Captain Smith that they had struck an iceberg. Captain Smith replied with ordering all watertight doors closed, but Murdoch sternly replied with, "All watertight doors had been closed, Captain." Captain Smith immediately sent stewards and the officers down to the lower decks to check how severe the damage was. It was found out that compartment 1, 2, and 3 were rapidly filling up with water. This was followed up by a report at compartment 4, which was also rapidly filling up with water. Then Captain Smith went down himself to see how severe the damage was, and to see if compartment 5 was also breached. To Captain Smith's horror, he saw that compartment 5 was gushing in water through a small but noticeable dent or hole through the hull, as Captain Smith describes it. This was followed with a sort of meeting between Thomas Andrews, J. Bruce Ismay, and Captain Smith. J. Bruce Ismay believes that Titanic was fine and there was nothing to be worried about. I cannot verify if this was true, but it was said that J. Bruce Ismay asked, "When can we go underway to New York. Captain Smith then asked Thomas Andrews if Titanic's collision with the iceberg was severe enough to sink Titanic. Thomas Andrews responds with a chilling message. The response to Ismay and Captain Smith is that there are 6 compartments technically breached. She can only stay afloat with 4 compartments breached. Thomas Andrews then proceeded to explain how water could spill over the compartments back to back, causing the Titanic to completely sink. When asked how much time does she have to live, I cannot verify this, but apparently Thomas Andrews responded an hour or 2 at most. After a brief interruption from Ismay, Thomas Andrews says that Titanic will founder. From here, this marks the beginning of the end of the famous ocean liner Titanic. Hope you guys enjoy part 3 of the Titanic series. I hope I can make part 4 as soon as possible, and stay tuned for that.